Hey, this is Leo for Actualize.org, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how to deal with difficult and toxic people. So let's talk about how to deal with people in your life who are bringing you down. These are people that I call either difficult or I like the word toxic. So what's the secret with dealing with these types of people? Because these types of people can destroy your life. There's really a spectrum of toxicity of other people in your life. Sometimes you have mildly toxic people who are just more like an annoyance or a frustration, but then it can get so bad on the other end of the spectrum that it really gets into abusive territory, just like very dysfunctional territory. And one of the things that's really key to understand about your life is that you are like a sponge. And no matter how personally developed you are, how successful you are, how happy you are, how optimistic you are, if you are living in a negative environment, whether it's a negative physical environment, but here we're talking about negative relationships. If you're living in this kind of negative relationship environment, then this is robbing you of your potential, and it's basically making you miserable. And these people, they're dragging you down because they're constantly feeding you with negativity and pessimism and limiting beliefs and maybe anger or other things. And these are rubbing off on you, right? Because you're this sponge, so you're soaking it all in, and it's affecting your psyche. And you have to work really, really hard to counteract these effects. So in this video, what I want to do is I want to cover some of the ways that you can go about handling these kinds of people and to give you different techniques and strategies. Basically, my philosophy on this is really simple. It's the philosophy that life is too short for dealing with difficult and toxic people. I mean, like, why? Why make life more difficult for yourself? Life is already pretty challenging. You're already working really hard on your own life, on your own self. Why are you bringing yourself down with these toxic people? There's no reason for it, right? So my strategy here and my solution ultimately is to get rid of these people out of my life. I want to live a life where the people that are in my life are supporting me, encouraging me, bringing in positivity. They're building something with me rather than going against me. And so that's kind of the ultimate solution. I really want to get to like the root cause of it here. Because a lot of people, what I see them doing is they're so stuck like in the social matrix. They're so worried about relying upon various social relationships that they're not willing to get rid of these toxic people out of their lives. And what this does is it creates this like spiral of negativity that goes down and down and down, and it brings you with it. And there's no need to live a life like that. In fact, what I'm going to argue is that you can't really self-actualize. You can't really create a powerful and happy, fulfilling life if you're surrounding yourself with these types of folks. Jim Rohn, love Jim Rohn. He has a lot of great wisdom. One of the most wise things that he said was that you are the average of the top 5 associates that you hang out with. What this means is that if you take and make a list of all the people in your life, and you write a number down for how many hours per week you're spending with each one of those people, and you then rank everybody according to the number of hours you spend with them, the top 5 people that you spend the most time with, these are the people that have the most influence on you. It's a very simple theory. Basically, whoever you hang out with is who you're going to absorb into yourself. And you kind of become the average of all that. Well, if this principle is true, then who do you want to surround yourself with? Positive, empowering people or negative, disempowering people? If you do this exercise, you actually write this out and you actually tally up the numbers. You might be shocked to discover that you hang out with some people a lot more than others. You might also be shocked to discover that some of those people that you hang out with and spend 5 or 10 or even 20 hours a week with, that those are super negative, super pessimistic, super miserable and depressive, anger-prone type of people. And maybe that's why you're not getting the success you want in your life. is because you're around these types of people all the time. You're stuck in this kind of environment. If that's the case, then we'll help you sort that out right now. Let's talk a little bit more about the types of people that we're talking about here. I want to get very specific. Take the abstract, bring it down into the concrete. So here are some of the people that qualify as being toxic. Basically, it can be anybody, but here are some categories that you really want to look out for. Your boss, your coworkers, and or business partners that you have. These are people that you usually spend a lot of time with because you put a lot of time into your work. So if these people are negative, you really want to watch out for that. Next is clients or customers that you have. If you're self-employed, you're working with clients and customers, or if you're even working for somebody else, you might be working with clients and customers that are toxic. You want to watch out for those. Of course, you want to watch out for your friends. What kind of circle of friends are you keeping around you? You have a lot of choices about what kind of friends you keep. Next is, of course, your intimate relationships. Girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband. You got to really watch out for that because, of course, your intimate relationship is your most intimate relationship. So that's where you get the closest to the other person. It's also probably your relationship that you spend the most time in, or one of the most. So toxicity there is very damaging. And finally, and this is the most difficult one, really, it's family. Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, aunts, uncles, cousins, and of course your own children. So this category is pretty broad, and there's a lot of stuff in here, and it's difficult to deal with it because family issues tend to be the most sticky and thorny issues. Because these are the people that are the most difficult to cut from your life. These are the people that you grew up with. These are the people that you probably want to keep around for a long, long time to come. So those are the categories, right? And anybody that these categories didn't cover, other types of people, they could also be toxic. Basically, anybody could be toxic, but these are the categories that are the most important to look at. And then the next thing that I want to get really clear on is, what do we mean by toxic? What does toxicity actually mean? Because this could mean different things to different people. It's a pretty subjective term. Let's break it down a little bit. Here's what I consider toxic, and these are the things you really want to watch out for. One is depression. People who are very depressed, feeling really down on themselves. Two is negativity and limiting beliefs. There could be people that aren't per se depressed, but they're always pessimistic, they're always casting doubts, they're always talking about how stuff can't happen, stuff won't work, they're always playing the victim role. And they've got all these sorts of beliefs about how life can't allow them to do what they want to do, and how it can't allow you to do what you want to do. See, it starts to rub off on you. Next is really dogmatic and closed-minded people. So these are folks that are just really, really set in their ways, right? They have certain sets of beliefs, maybe religious beliefs, political beliefs, business beliefs, life beliefs, and they just have to have it that way, and they want you to fit into that one particular mold that they're playing. So they're playing a role, they want you to play the same role, really closed-minded people. Next is anger-prone people and violent people. So anger can be a spectrum. You can have mild forms of anger, and then it can get worse and worse and worse and really devolve into full-out violence or fights, throwing objects, that kind of really toxic stuff. After that comes drama. Drama's horrible. Drama, those people, there's always something happening in their life. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, they always make it dramatic. They always take a molehill and make a huge mountain out of it. It's always up and down, and it's predictable. These people just have a very turbulent, dramatic lifestyle, and that's just how they live. But that's not how you want to live. And finally, criminal activity. Maybe your friends are involved with criminal activity. Maybe someone in your family is. Maybe you're someone at your job, or maybe your company is involved with some sort of shady activities that you don't want to be sucked into. But criminal activity is a really dangerous one because once you have those types of people around you, you tend to get more and more sucked into that, and then you're prone to get involved with that even if you didn't intend to from the very beginning. And those people can be real leeches on your life because their life is so upside down that it can't help just rubbing off and infecting you. So that one is really important to consider as far as toxicity goes. And lastly, I would say people with addictions. It could be hardcore addictions, but even softcore addictions. So of course, if you have people around you who are using drugs and really involved with something pretty heavy like that, That's obviously very toxic. But even more milder forms of addictions. Maybe your friends are addicted to television or addicted to video games and they suck you into it too. Or maybe they're addicted to food. They go out and eat all the time. Maybe your family is addicted to food. I know that's how my family was. So that stuff can be really toxic to you and keep you from progressing and breaking out of those negative habits. So what's the ultimate solution? We talked about the types of people. We talked about the specific types of toxicities. What's the ultimate solution for how to deal with this problem? It's actually pretty simple. It's to cut people out of your life. It's so simple that sometimes people forget that this is an option, right? Literally, what you do is you take a scalpel and you cut that person out of your life like a tumor. You excise a tumor from your body. This is a very apt metaphor for what you're doing because this is what's happening. Because of this sponge-like effect that your mind has and it soaks everything up, because of this averaging law that we talked about from Jim Rohn, it really is the case that once negativity seeps into your system, it just kind of like builds and builds and it metastasizes like a cancer. And it just like spreads throughout your whole body, spreads through your mind. And then sooner or later, it starts to infect your habits, it affects your behaviors, it infects your ways of thinking. It really colors your perspective of the world. And so this can be a dangerous thing if it happens like over prolonged periods of time, months and years go by. So what you really got to do is you got to build up the courage to cut these kinds of people out of your life. Just simply cut them out. One of the things I want you to kind of acknowledge to yourself and admit to yourself right now is that it doesn't matter who. If someone is violating your standards, your principles and your values in life, then that person can be cut. And it doesn't matter who it is. Bosses and coworkers, friends, customers, they can all be cut. And even family can be cut. This is where sometimes people have trouble is with family. They'll say, but Leo, family, like you can't cut family. And maybe you might even say something like, well, I have this really good friend, old friend from middle school. I've known him for decades now. I can't cut him. I can't cut her. I can't cut this client. It's a really important client. I can't cut my boss off, or my work off. So there's all these sorts of excuses and stories about who you can and can't cut and why there are certain people in your life that you can never cut. You got to accept that everyone can be cut. You have to have boundaries. You have to have principles as a human being. You hold yourself to principles. You hold other people to principles. This doesn't mean you have to be like a stickler and just for any stupid reason you cut someone off. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when someone really violates an important principle of yours, they get cut. Of course, the closer the person is to you, the more important they are, then the little more leeway you can give them. But even with people like your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, even your own children, you still have to have boundaries. Because if you don't set any boundaries, subconsciously people realize that you have no boundaries. And even people that are really close to you, what they'll do is they'll basically just kind of like, they'll see what they can get away with. And they'll get away with more and more and more and more. And especially these toxic people, they're not really self-developed people. They're not operating from a place of high consciousness. They're just kind of like really running their life almost like an animal. It's very like an animalistic type of lifestyle. Very low consciousness, just kind of like doing the easy stuff in life. And that type of person, they'll tend to just like demand more and more and more life out of you, right? And there'll be a bigger and bigger and bigger drag. So I find that with those types of people, boundaries are even more important. So right now, acknowledge to yourself that there are circumstances under which you will cut anybody, right? Even someone that's really close to you, even a child of yours. At some point, if your child starts to behave in such a ridiculous way, just doing some like totally wrong things, after a certain while, you have to set some boundaries, and you have to enforce those boundaries. Those boundaries have to have teeth. You can't just be issuing like idle threats, because people quickly learn that it's just like empty threats, and then they just keep breaking and breaking those boundaries of yours. So some people you're going to cut as a last resort. That would be your family. Other people, maybe you'd be less have less reservations to cut. How do you cut someone out of your life? It's actually pretty simple. There's depending on the type of person, how close they are to you, how important they are to you, there's different situations. But here's some ideas. One is you sit down with the person, you really tell them the problems that you have with them, and then you tell them that that's it. It's over. Don't contact me anymore. I'm not contacting you. And just like draw a line. The other thing you could do is you could simply like delete the person's number. If it's someone that's more of a casual acquaintance, just delete their number. Don't contact them anymore. Block their number. Block their emails. Block whatever means of communication there is. Just like literally block it. Or stop responding to them. If it's the case that you're in a relationship and it's like an intimate relationship that you're dealing with, then break up with that person. Breakups are really tough, but sometimes you got to do them even when they're really tough. If you're in a marriage and the person's really toxic, consider divorce. That can be a long and nasty and grueling process, but hey, it's better than sitting through a toxic marriage for 10, 20, 30 years. You're not going to be able to sit in that for a long time. It's just going to it's going to rot you. It's going to rot your soul. So you got to cut it off before it gets even worse than it is. If it's with career and business, consider quitting your job or changing jobs or transferring to a different department, doing a different type of job within the company if you're in a bad department. If you're the boss or you're self-employed and you have employees, then consider firing bad employees. If you have contracts with customers or clients that are bad, cut off those contracts. Say no to those contracts, even if they are going to bring you business. And if worse comes to worse and you're in a really negative environment, maybe you're in a really bad part of the city, really bad part of the state, part of the country, maybe you're in a very dangerous or like toxic country even, somewhere in the third world, then consider relocating. Worse comes to worse, find a new part of the city, or go to a new city, or go to a new state, or go to a new country if you have to do that. Because your environment is very influential on the kind of life that you have, the kind of emotions you're going to feel, and the kind of success you get. So take this stuff seriously. Of course, you don't need to cut everybody. Sometimes it's possible to do a reform, like a reformation. You can sit down if somebody's really violating your values. If you've had enough, you're like fed up with all the toxicity and negativity and anger and all that stuff, then you can sit down with that person and you can lay out what your boundaries are, what your principles are, what your expectations are. It's going to be a difficult talk, but you can have that talk and then you can see what happens. Sometimes that kind of talk will really change that person. It'll be kind of like a light bulb in their head and they'll say, oh, wow, I didn't even realize I was hurting you so bad. I didn't realize I was messing up your life with my toxicity and my negativity. Let me see if I can change something. And sometimes they'll do that because they value the relationship. And they know that you'll cut them off if you don't, right? There's that like seriousness to you. But then, of course, some of these people, they're in such a low consciousness state that they can't help themselves. Maybe they're addicted to stuff. Maybe they're chronically depressed. Maybe they're just like so negative. Maybe they have a lot of bad habits. And maybe they don't want to change. Maybe they don't care about changing. This is actually probably going to be the most common case. These people simply don't care. They don't want to change. They're not going to accommodate you. And they're going to keep repeatedly violating your values. They're not really going to listen to you. Even if you sit down and talk to them, they'll just continue running on autopilot and continue breaking your boundaries. You have to be smart about this. You have to become a good judge of character, right? This is something you develop as you grow older as a human being, is you get like a good eye for who's a good character in life and who's a bad character. According to your own values. It's not an objective thing, it's a subjective thing. But you get a good eye for that, and then you can see which kind of people will keep on those bad habits. Because usually human beings, we run on patterns. We're very, very like simple-minded creatures. When we're stuck in a bad loop of habits, we just kind of keep going and going and going down that road, and it gets like worse and worse and worse. And some people, they just like can't help it. They're incorrigible. You got to look out for those, and then when you see that that's that type of person, and you think like there's no way that guy's going to reform, then steer clear. Those are the people you got to cut. And then of course, if your boundaries keep getting broken repeatedly, then you just decide to cut that person off. Okay, so that's as far as cutting goes. What happens if you can't cut the person? Can't cut them off. Why would this happen? Here's a metaphor for you I think it's a good metaphor. It's a chess metaphor. Imagine that I'm playing white, you're playing black. We got a chessboard like this. In chess, they have a scenario that you can get yourself into. It's a really kind of a pickle of a scenario, and it's called a skewer. What is a skewer? So you're the black player, I'm the white player. Let's say your king is in the middle of the board right here. Your queen is here in the corner, and it's on a diagonal from your king. Now, I've got a bishop. A bishop is a piece that moves diagonally. I'm white. What I do is I put my bishop here in the corner, and it's diagonally right across, and it checks your king, and your queen is right behind it. This is called a skewer. Why is it a skewer? Because what happens is that because your king is in check, now you have to move your king. But if you move your king, then I can take your queen, because now your queen is vulnerable, and the queen is the most important piece. But you can't move your queen first because your king is in check. Basically, in this situation, what happens is that you really exposed yourself. You left yourself very vulnerable. And now because you did that, from a strategic standpoint, now I can just position my bishop right here, and I basically got you by the balls. And so this is ultimately the most fundamental reason of why you can't cut people from your life so easily, is because you've exposed yourself and you've put yourself strategically in a bad position. And so now you're there, and they've got you by the balls. So what does this mean? Well, one solution to figure out how to deal with toxic people when you can't cut them out is kind of a long-term solution. And this is to actually sit down and redesign your life so that you're no longer vulnerable, you're no longer exposed, and you're no longer relying on these people, and then you can cut them off. Because here's some problems you might have. Maybe you want to cut off that person over there, but you can't because you're relying on him financially. He literally pays your bills, or he pays your rent, he pays for your food. So what can you do? You can't really cut them off because you got to eat, you got to pay your rent. You're not financially independent, basically. What about with intimate relationships? There, the thing that could have you by the balls is you either want love or companionship or sex. And so that's the thing that you want, and you feel like you're getting at from this relationship, and so you can't cut her off, or you can't cut him off, because you need that exchange that's going on there. You don't really have relationship abundance, you don't have sexual abundance. That's the problem you have there. What about with work, with employment situations? Well, maybe you're relying on somebody who is giving you employment opportunities. Maybe you're relying on somebody who is helping you to grease the wheels for your business and make stuff happen there. And so that's important to you, and you don't want to just cut that person off because you'd lose something that's very valuable there. Well, that shows you that you're relying on bad characters in business, and you're not independent with your business or with your employment. What about with your friends? Sometimes your friends, you really like your friends, you have a whole history built up with your friends. Sometimes your friends are like a good shoulder for you to cry on, so they give you kind of like emotional stability. So that might be something that keeps you attached to a friend who's being toxic to you. And there, again, you're kind of putting yourself in a compromising situation. And also with business, you might have a client or a customer. Maybe you have a big client, somebody who's going to give you millions of dollars to make something happen. But this person's also toxic. And so on the one hand, you don't want to do it. On the other hand, you do want to do it. And so you're in this bind. What you really want to avoid as you're thinking about how to re-engineer your life is these kinds of binds and skewering situations. So long term, the root of this problem is solved here, is you think about, how do I make myself independent? How do I make myself have financial independence and abundance? How do I myself have a relationship and sexual abundance so I'm not needy there? How do I get myself abundance in my business and abundance with my friends? Once you build up all this abundance, then actually it's very easy. You can enforce your boundaries very easily because you don't need any particular individual in your life. That's a powerful place to come from. So this is not something you can create immediately, but this is something you can start to work on. So if you have a situation where you feel like you're trapped, the bright side there is that you can sit down and say, oh, okay, I'm trapped now, but over the next year or two, I can untrap myself. Let me see what kind of steps I need to take to untrap myself, and then go ahead and take those steps. The next thing you can do is if you can't cut a person, simply limit your exposure to that person. Sit down and ask yourself, how many hours a week am I spending with this person? Is it 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours? Well, if it's something like 20 hours, let's say maybe with a coworker you're spending 20 hours, that's 20 hours of toxicity. That's quite a lot of time. If you can reduce that to 15 hours or 10 hours or even 5 hours, that would be pretty good. That means maybe you can't cut that person off entirely. You don't have that authority at your job. He's a coworker. Okay, but maybe what you can do is you can just like limit your time and exposure with that person, cut it in half. That's going to half your toxicity. It's a pretty like simple, kind of obvious thing, but you can find little creative ways about how to limit your exposure, even to your family, even to your kids if they're really toxic to your life, even to your spouse, even to your girlfriend or boyfriend. For now, at least to hold things over. Hopefully in the long run, you're kind of working to solve that stuff more at the root like I was talking about just earlier. The other thing you can do is you can add more positive people into your life. So let's say you've got someone who's really negative in your life. You can't cut them out for whatever reason, you're in a bind. But what you can do is you can add more positive influences into your life. This could be people, but also the next thing is that you can add influences that aren't just face-to-face people. They could also be like digital media. So for example, listening to self-help videos, self-help audios, reading high-quality books, going to seminars, this kind of stuff. This can be one of your associations. When Jim Rohn is talking about those 5 associates that you hang out with the most, well, if you spend a lot of your time reading, or if you spend a lot of your time watching these videos or somebody else's videos, stuff that is positive and uplifting and inspiring to you, then that's like a virtual associate that you have. And that can help you to kind of like pull you out from a negative situation that you're in face to face with somebody. So if you can't cut the negative influences, at least raise the positive influences. Good. So those are some ideas for if you can't cut somebody. And lastly, what I want to cover here is, what do you do in the heat of the moment? So let's say that you're dealing with a toxic person, and of course, everything we've talked about now is kind of like long-term strategy. But what if somebody literally like blows up in your face? Let's say you're sitting there at home, watching TV, clicking through the channels, and somebody, let's say your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend, they burst through the door. It's drama, it's anger, they're throwing stuff, they're yelling at you, like this is happening, right? And now you're like in the heat of the moment. What do you do? How do you handle that situation? Well, the problem here is that you allowed yourself to be in this situation in the first place. So I really want you to realize that this problem has to be fixed much earlier in life, right? You got to ask yourself, like, why am I in this situation in the first place? Why am I allowing this kind of person to be in my life? But okay, let's say it's too late for that now. You should have thought about that before, but let's say you didn't. So now what do you do? Well, really, these types of people, the best thing to do, and this is difficult, is not to engage them. Don't engage them. Don't engage them mentally, and definitely don't engage them physically. Try not to engage them verbally either. Because what you're going to do if you engage them is you're going to get into like a mudslinging contest. And because they're in a low consciousness state, and you get into a low consciousness state, it just starts to devolve into something nasty. And nothing good ever comes from that. You're not going to get any piece of gold or, some beautiful piece of wisdom from that kind of interaction with somebody. That only comes from a high consciousness type of interaction. So the best thing to do there is just try to distance yourself as much as you can. If you can, walk out. Walk out of the house. Walk out of the car. Walk out of the office. Walk out of the building, right? Just leave. If you're on the phone call, hang up the phone. If you're getting text messages, block the texts. If you're shooting emails, cut off that email thread. Just very simple, very obvious. But a lot of people, what they do is they just get triggered and triggered and triggered into it. And it's difficult because you're trying to work on yourself. You're trying to do the best you can. This person comes in, maybe they're totally in the wrong. They're violating your standards and your boundaries. Maybe you've already talked to that person a lot of times about it, and they still keep doing it. So you're very frustrated, obviously. And this is going to take the most from you to maintain that kind of equanimity or evenness of mind. And that's the best way to handle this situation, is to not react emotionally at all. To be detached from the outcome, totally emotionally unreactive, just like cool, collected. And practicing mindfulness. This is where mindfulness practice really helps. This is where meditation helps. I have a lot of different videos out there that tell you how to deal with stress, how to deal with anger, how to deal with negativity from other people, and how to like calm your own emotions. There are various different techniques that you can use just to calm yourself down in the heat of the moment. And of course, if you practice meditation every morning, like you're supposed to be doing, and you've been doing that habitually for weeks and months every single day, then that makes you grounded. That makes you more even-keeled. That makes it easier for you to deal with these kind of difficult people simply by not reacting to them. And you see that when you don't react to them, a lot of times these people just kind of like, they settle down, or even if they don't settle down, at least you don't feed into their anger and their negativity. Because a lot of times that's the worst thing, is when you start to feed into it and it creates like this cyclone. So practice walking away and practice mindfulness. Don't engage these people. Also, don't be too judgmental of these people. A lot of times what we'll tend to do is we see someone doing something very wrong in our life, and we'll say, oh, how could he? How could she? What are they doing? What are they thinking? And then we start getting to this kind of judgment mode. And that's also a low consciousness trap that you don't want to get caught in. In fact, I have a video called How to Exploit People to Grow Yourself, which tells you kind of an advanced technique that I've learned about how to reframe in your mind these situations where people are doing stupid stuff that isn't right according to your values, how to reframe that. Instead of judging them, use that to actually build yourself up, to develop wisdom and see, oh, okay, so they're doing something weird there. How am I doing something similar in my own life? And basically what you do is you use those people as a mirror to show you how you could improve yourself. Because you always want to be focused on yourself versus focused on trying to control and manipulate and fix other people, because that tends to backfire a lot. So these people that are toxic, they can actually be important reminders for you of your own personal development needs. So if you keep all that in mind, then I think that's going to help you a lot to fix some of these toxic people, cut them out, or to minimize their effects on your life. All right, this is Leo. I'm going to be signing off. Go ahead, post me your comments down below. I'd love to hear what you think. Click on the like button, leave me a like. That spreads the videos around. Go ahead and share the video on Facebook or somewhere else. The more these videos spread, the more free content I can keep releasing. And finally, come and sign up to my newsletter. This is the newsletter right here at actualize.org. You can sign up there. I release new updates for free every single week. I have a lot of cool new stuff planned for my subscribers. It's going to be exclusive. That won't be possible on YouTube, so you want to sign up for that if you're digging what I'm sharing here on YouTube. And really, the reason you want to sign up is because I'm excited about delivering more wisdom about how to master yourself, how to master your psychology, how to understand how to work with people, how to understand how to get your relationships ironed out. But really, the reason that we're talking about all this is so that you can be creating a passionate life, the kind of life that you want, right? The kind of life that you've always dreamed of, but it's hard. It's like a struggle to create that kind of extraordinary life that you want. And what I'm really passionate about is kind of studying all the experts, reading all the books, and applying this stuff in my life and seeing what works the best, what doesn't work so well, and then coming up here and sharing the best of the wisdom that I found with you so that you can put the pieces into place and we can create a more passionate life for you. If you're down with that, then sign up and you're going to be all set.